Aileen Carol Wuornos, born Aileen Carol Pittman. Aileen was born February 29, 1956, and she was executed on October 9, 2002. Aileen was an American serial killer who murdered 7 men in Florida between 1989 and 1990 by shooting them at point blank range. Wuornos claimed that her victims had either raped or attempted to rape her while she was working as a prostitute, and that all of the homicides were committed in self defense. She was convicted and sentenced to death for 6 of the murders and was executed by lethal injection on October 9, 2002. Aileen Wuornos was born Aileen Carol Pittman in Troy, Michigan on February 29, 1956. Her mother, Diane Wuornos, born 1934, was 14 years old when she married Eileen's father, 16-year-old Leo Dale Pittman, on June 3, 1954. Eileen's older brother Keith was born on March 14, 1955. After less than 2 years of marriage and 2 months before Eileen was born, Diane filed for divorce. Eileen never met her father. He was incarcerated at the time of her birth. Leo Dale Pittman was diagnosed with schizophrenia, later convicted of sex crimes against children, and eventually committed suicide by hanging himself in prison on January 30th, 1969. In January 1960, when Eileen was almost 4 years old, Diane, Eileen's mother, abandoned her children, leaving them with their maternal grandparents, Lori and Britta Wuornos, who legally adopted Keith and Eileen on March 18, 1960. By the age of 11, Eileen began engaging in sexual activities in school in exchange for cigarettes, drugs, and food. She had also engaged in sexual activities with her brother. Eileen said that her alcoholic grandfather had sexually assaulted and beaten her when she was a child. Before beating her, he would force her to strip out of her clothes. In 1970, at the age of 14, she became pregnant, having been raped by one of her grandfather's friends. Eileen gave birth to a boy at a home for unwed mothers on March 23, 1971, and the child was placed for adoption. A few months after her son was born, she dropped out of school at about the same time that her grandmother died of liver failure. When Eileen was 15, her grandfather threw her out of the house and she began supporting herself as a prostitute and living in the woods near her old home. On May 27, 1974, at the age of 18, Wuornos was arrested in Jefferson County, Colorado for driving under the influence, disorderly conduct, and firing a .22 caliber pistol from a moving vehicle. She was later charged with failure to appear. In 1976, Eileen hitchhiked to Florida where she met a 69-year-old yacht club president, Louis Gratz Fell. They married quickly, and the announcement of their nuptials was printed in the local newspaper Society page. However, Eileen continually involved herself in confrontations at their local bar and went to jail briefly for assault. She also hit Fell with his own cane, leading him to gain a restraining order against her within weeks of the marriage. Eileen returned to Michigan, where on July 14, 1976, she was arrested in Antrim County and was charged with assault and disturbing the peace for throwing a cue ball at a bartender's head. On July 17th, her brother Keith died of cancer, and Eileen received $10,000 from his life insurance. Eileen and Fell annulled their marriage on July 21st after only 9 weeks. In August 1976, Eileen was given a $105 fine for drunk driving, and she used the money inherited from her brother to pay the fine and spent the rest within 2 months buying luxuries, including a new car, which she wrecked shortly afterwards. On May 20th, 1981, Eileen was arrested in Edgewater, Florida for the armed robbery of a convenience store where she stole $35 and 2 packs of cigarettes. She was sentenced to prison on May 4th, 1982 and released on June 30th, 1983. On May 1st, 1984, Eileen was arrested for attempting to pass a forged check to a bank in Key West. On November 30th, 1985, she was named as a suspect in the theft of a revolver and ammunition in Pasco County. On January 4th, 1986, Aileen was arrested in Miami and charged with car theft, resisting arrest, and obstruction of justice for providing identification bearing her aunt's name. Miami police officers found a .35 caliber revolver and a box of ammunition in the stolen car. On June 2nd, 1986, deputy sheriffs detained Aileen for questioning after a male companion accused her of pulling a gun in his car and demanded $200. Aileen was found to be carrying spare ammunition, and the police discovered a .22 pistol under the passenger seat she occupied. Around this time, Wuornos met Tyra Moore, a hotel maid at a Daytona Beach gay bar. They moved in together, and Aileen supported them with her earnings as a prostitute. On July 4th, 1987, Daytona Beach police detained Wuornos and Moore at a bar for questioning regarding an incident in which they were accused of assault and battery with a beer bottle. On March 12, 1988, Aileen accused a Daytona Beach bus driver of assault. She claimed that he pushed her off the bus following a confrontation. Moore was listed as a witness to the incident. Up until her execution, Aileen claimed to still be in love with Moore. Within a 12-month period, Aileen Wuornos had killed 7 men. Aileen's first victim was Richard Mallory, age 51. He was murdered on November 30th, 1989. He was an electronics store owner in Clearwater. Wuornos' first victim was a convicted rapist she claimed to have killed in self-defense. 2 days later, a deputy sheriff found Mallory's abandoned vehicle. On December 13th, his body was found several miles away in a wooded area. He had been shot several times. 2 bullets to the left lung were found to be the cause of death. It was on this murder that Wuornos was initially condemned. Aileen's second victim was David Spears, age 43. David was a construction worker in Winter Garden. On June 1st, 1990, his naked body was found along Florida State Road 19 in Citrus County. He had been shot 6 times. Aileen's third victim was Charles Carskadon, age 40. He was murdered on May 31st, 1990. He was a part-time rodeo worker, and on June 6, 1990, his body was found in Pasco County. He had been shot 9 times with a small caliber weapon. The fourth victim, Peter Sims, age 65, was a retired merchant seaman who devoted much of his time to a Christian outreach ministry. In June 1990, Sims left Jupiter, Florida for Arkansas. On July 4th, 1990, his car was found in Orange Springs, Florida. Moore and Wuornos were seen abandoning the car, and Wuornos' palm print was found on the interior door handle. His body was never found. Aileen's fifth victim was Troy Barris, age 50. He was a sausage salesman. On July 31st, 1990, he was reported missing. On August 4th, 1990, his body was found in a wooded area along State Road 19 in Marion County. He had been shot twice. The sixth victim was Charles Dick Humphreys, age 56. Aileen murdered him September 11th, 1990. Charles was retired U.S. Air Force major and a former state child abuse investigator and a former chief of police. On September 12th, 1990, his body was found in Marion County. He was fully clothed and had been shot 6 times in the head and torso. The seventh victim was Walter Gino Antonio, age 62, a trucker, security guard, and a police reservist. On November 19, 1990, Antonio's nearly naked body was found near a remote logging road in Dixie County. He had been shot 4 times. 5 days later, his car was found in a nearby county. On July 4, 1990, Aileen Wuornos and Tyra Moore abandoned Sims' car after they were involved in an accident. Witnesses who had seen the women driving the victim's car provided police with their name and description, resulting in a media campaign to locate them. The police also found some of the victim's belongings in a pawn shop and retrieved fingerprints matching those found in the victim's car. Wuornos had a criminal record in Florida, and her fingerprints were on file. On January 9th, 1991, Wuornos was arrested on an outstanding warrant at the Last Resort Biker Bar in Daytona Beach, Florida. Police located Moore the next day in Pennsylvania. She agreed to try to get a confession from Wuornos in exchange for immunity. Moore returned with the police to Florida, where she was put up in a motel. Under police guidance, she made numerous telephone calls to Aileen, pleading for her to help clear her name. 3 days later, on January 16th, 1991, Aileen Wuornos confessed to the murders. She claimed the men had tried to rape her, and she killed them in self-defense. A year later, on January 14th, 1992, Aileen went to trial for the murder of Mallory. Although previous convictions are normally inadmissible in criminal trials, under Florida's William Rule, the prosecution was allowed to introduce evidence related to her other crimes to show a pattern of illegal activity. On January 27th, 1992, Wuornos was convicted of Mallory's murder with the help from Tyra Moore's testimony. At her sentencing, psychiatrists for the defense testified that Aileen was mentally unstable and had been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder. 4 days later, she was sentenced to death. On March 31st, 1992, Wuornos pleaded no contest to the murders of Humphreys, Barris, and Spears. She said in court that she wanted to get right with God, and she also said in her statement to the court that she wanted to confess that Richard Mallory did not violently rape her like she had told in court. On May 15th, 1992, Wuornos was given 3 more death sentences. Wuornos told several inconsistent stories about the killings. She claimed initially that all 7 men had raped her while she was working as a prostitute, but later recanted the claim of self-defense, citing robbery and desire to leave no witnesses as the reason for the murder. During an interview with the filmmaker Nick Broomfield, when she thought the cameras are off, she told him that it was, in fact, self-defense, but she could not stand being on death row, where she had been for almost 10 years at that point, and she wanted to die. Aileen Wuornos' execution took place on October 9, 2002. She died at 9:47 a.m. Eastern Time. She declined her last meal, which would have been anything under $20, and opted for a cup of coffee instead. Her last words were, "Yes, I would like to say I'm sailing with the Rock, and I'll be back, like Independence Day with Jesus. June 6th, like the movie. Big mothership, and I'll be back. I'll be back." She was the 10th woman in the United States and the second in Florida to be executed since the 1976 United States Supreme Court decision restoring capital punishment. Thank you for watching, and we will discuss this on my next live stream, and we'll go into more details about Aileen Wuornos. Thank you.